Hey there, we're doing a dog and a blanket today. So this is the sped up version. I'll be posting the full version with all my meaningless commentary that I do while I paint these. So this is something with fabric, and I wanted to cover that topic because a lot of times a dog or a cat will be on a blanket or a sheet or their little bed or whatever. So I wanted to cover that in one of these videos here. So this is base coats, and again this is on velour paper. That's the shaggy paper with the individual fibers, and so your pastel dust will nest in between the fibers like you see here with me rubbing it in with my hand. And I do that so you don't have a big collection of dust like a sandcastle on top of the paper, because that's going to be a problem. If you have a big sandcastle and you come in with a pencil, all you're going to be doing is parting the sand. You're not actually going to be making much of a mark, and it doesn't look good. And plus you have a lot of residue to either vacuum up or go outside and whack it and get the residue off or something. So it's better to go light and then come around if you need to later with more pastel dust, and that's fine. But it's best to start off light, as well as if you make a mistake, because you started off light, now you're able to not really erase on velour, but you are able to put a different color on top. If you were to just cake it on like a sandcastle, getting another color on top of it would be next to impossible. So it's easier just to go light, get your colors in. If you want to make some highlights or make some emphasis later, then we get to do that. So this is a color called butterscotch, and it's a color you see a lot. And if you look at the reference photo, you'll see the color, and you'll see these with everything from pit bulls to chihuahuas to some cats. It's used a lot, especially on the dog side of the fence for pets, but you still see butterscotch used with cats. It's one of the main colors. If you're starting a library of colors, it's one of the main colors that I would recommend that you use, because that's really going to come in handy for you, because you find it so often, even if it's not the primary color of the pet or the animal, you do find it a lot in nature, especially if you do pets. So let's say you're doing commissions, or let's say you're doing your relatives or friends' pets, you'll find that butterscotch will be required quite a bit. So in the Great American Pastel, you'll see you have different shades of butterscotch. You'll have it has 6 versions. You have the completely saturated, very dark butterscotch, and then you'll have the super light, almost white. So I'm using actually most of those colors, all 6. And you'll notice I come back and I'm very picky about where the darks are, where the lights are, because that's very important. Once you shy away from long hairs, in other words, if you have like a cat with tons and tons and tons of long hairs, then you pretty much know the lights versus the dark. So you can put the long hairs in and then make little light areas or little dark areas within those, and it looks good. However, if there's no long hairs, now you need to really nail the values. In other words, how light it is, how dark it is. So here I'm coming in with the variety of different butterscotch shades here, and I'm just getting the lights where the lights go and the darks where the darks go. So this other color I'm using is called Grumber, and that's like a desaturated dark brown. And you'll see that on the right side, and you'll see it here right now as well. So Grumber is a pretty powerful color. So you'll notice I didn't flood the painting with Grumber. I just sort of mushed it in right on the edge there. So now I'm coming in with a reddish brown, and we're getting the reddish brown. It's called burnt sienna. So we're getting the reddish brown and just making a little bit of a saturation in that area. Now you'll notice on the reference photo, it's not this saturated. However, it's better to be a little bit more saturated than not enough, because what the problem you'll run into is when you put it behind glass and you hang it on the wall, a lot of times it just doesn't look good because it's not saturated enough. You have bled the life out of it because it's not in the same, it doesn't have gallery lighting, it's behind glass. You have a lot of different problems at that point. So here's Grumber again. So I'd rather be a little more saturated than normal. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. And this is way, way, way too red. But I'm going to chill it out by putting some butterscotch on top of it and sort of blending those two dusts together. So just getting the base coat in at this point, which is your most important phase, because it saves you a lot of time. If you were to just do individual hairs or just get a pencil and do the whole thing, it's going to take you forever, probably 20 hours, 25 hours, and I knocked this out in 4 hours. So again, I'll have the full uncut version of this posted at the very end. So keep an eye out for that and scroll to the bottom to see that. So here again, getting a little more red. The problem I have here is I don't have the color that's on the photo, which is unfortunate because I have a gazillion colors, but I don't have this color. So I'm sort of having to wing it here by combining 2-3 different colors and getting those in. So again, putting that overly saturated red and then coming back and sort of easing that up with a different color. So here we're going into the light area where we have the key light of the sun, I think. We have the key light hitting this area over here. And so I wanted to get that up in there. So unfortunately, the leg turns out it was a little too white. I had to go adjust it at the very end off camera. So I did that at the very end and it was a little too white. So again, we're doing base coats. Now we're just going to get some different colors in here. And I think I used 10 different colors on this dog, which is perfect because that's sort of what you want for extreme detail. And as you saw in the very beginning, this is an extremely detailed drawing. So we want to make sure and get the detail in where we need it. So coming back in here with the darker butterscotch, and you'll notice we're missing really, really dark colors. That's one of the problems I have with Great American Pastels. I love Great American. However, for some of the browns, you'll have a couple of darks, and that's the only darks you get. Like, it would have been nice to have this in a little bit of a darker shade, but it doesn't exist. So you have to go to something else. And the choices you have for the darks are not exactly what you want. So you have to sort of wing it and put down a dark and then put in the light, put down a little more dark, put down a little more light until you get exactly the color that you want. So sort of munging them together is quite a pain, but it's necessary at times. So here we go with the super light bright, and we're going to come in with the super pastel, the Giraud pastels. We're going to come in with those later, but for now we just want to get some bright colors in. I like the super bright colors from the pastel, different pastel brands, because it's not white, it's sort of an off-white, and that's what you want. You don't want a pure white here, because we're going to come back later with more color and saturation. However, right now we're just putting in the whites, and then we're going to come back with colored pencil and put in more whites. So this is again Grumber. I'm going really light on it, just so I have that little action in there. So here we go with more butterscotch, and we're going the direction of the hair, so we have a nice realistic look to it. So that's the cool thing about base coats. I think once you have base coats in, your work is almost done, because I think I did this in 45 minutes. Other than me talking and looking for colors and whatnot, it was about 45 minutes. And when I was done with it, I had a very good representation of the dog already. So this, once you get this in, it's just easy from then on. It's all downhill, which is fantastic. That's exactly what you want. Okay, here we go with a little darker. Again, I have to mix Grumber with butterscotch to get the effect that I want. And I actually think it's a little too dark. Looking at it, it does look a little too dark, but I like the effect. I think it's okay. I think I can get away with it. That's one of the problems if you have a really light area and then it goes to a really dark area. It's hard to pull that off correctly. Because if you lighten the area, if you have a deep shadow on the left side of their face or whatever, and you lighten that up, now you're in a situation to where it just doesn't match the photo and it doesn't have the impact that it did before. So we're going slightly dark, but not super dark. So here we are with Grumber. And I wanted to get a little hint of this color in there, in the nose area. So you see the nose, when the dog is looking at us, is a little to the left and down, too much. So noses normally are going to be dead center between the eyes. However, this one's leaning left a lot because of the way he's looking. So I had to sort of compensate for that. So here we go. So we're starting the, I guess this is a blanket of some sort. We're starting the blanket. And I think these dogs, the Chihuahuas, I think they like to get underneath the blankets just because they're naturally cold. So if you've ever owned one, they'll find a blanket and get under it. And that's pretty much because I think they're just cold-natured, and so they want to keep warm. So here we go with the different Great American butterscotches. And you'll notice I'm putting in darks and then going back in with lights. I just want that middle ground there. So the ears are actually the most detailed part of the dog. So I'll take some time with those. But it does turn out pretty good. So we've got the base coats at the bottom, base coats at the top. So we're going to do the ears here and then start on the blanket. So one thing about fabric, there's a lot of cool tips with fabric, and I'll break that out into a different video. As far as fabric goes, there's a lot of tips to make it much more pleasing to the eye, to where it almost looks like you can reach out and touch it. So when you get to that level, which is easy to do, you just need a couple of techniques, then it really makes your fabric come to life, makes your blanket come to life, or the bed sheets, or whatever the pet or animal's laying on. So here we are, we have I believe this is 457. That is a deep dark red. And that color looks really good. If you'll notice on the reference photo, the sides of the ears are almost black, they're really dark. But I wanted to put some saturation in there as well. I don't want to just smother on pure black. I want to add a little saturation to it where I can, and that will make it much better. So just going around the tips of the ears with this saturated color. and it looks really good. And I also used the 457 for a lot of the blanket as well, so you'll see that in just a few minutes. So this took about 4 hours, and I have split it out into an hour worth of video. So here we go with the 457, getting a little bit of the highlights there, little dark sections, going between the highlights, not getting the highlights, sorry. Going between the highlights, so showing my pastels. So these are Great Americans. Now these are Giro pastels, again Giro 457. So I have a small set of these, and if you drop them, they will break into a bazillion pieces, as you just saw. This is one thing you don't want to do with Giro pastels, is drop them. If you drop a Rembrandt, it's not as bad, but Giro, for some reason, they're just really fragile. And when you drop them, it's not good at all. So we're putting a little red down at the bottom there. Get a nice and detailed dog at the end. I'm very pleased with how it turned out. So again, here we are at the base coat stage, rubbing it in. So you have a nice thin layer. So we already sort of went over it with one layer and made it thin. Now we're going with a second layer. And we're just sort of rubbing it in, the second layer in, so it blends in with the first layer, and that will create a nice effect. Giro pastels, I really, really like those because they are just super, super pigmented. I don't know what they do. I don't know what the formula is to make those pastels, but they are insanely pigmented. Like it just dumps pigment. They do not cheap out on those, which is why they're so expensive, obviously. So you can see here, coming in and starting with the 457 on the sides here. And starting the blanket details. So we'll have a whole section on fabric, but I give you a fabric preview. Basically, you want your darks and lights, you want them to be perfect. Once you have your darks and lights in, you want to make sure that you have some saturated and some unsaturated sections. You don't want to use like one color. You want to have different colors. So I have like 5 different colors I'm using for the blanket alone. I have the well-lit section. I have the sort of a deeper gray section where there's shadows. I have a pure white section, and then as you can see here, these are in the light. So some of them are halfway in the light, some of them are all the way in the light. And then combine that with the lights and darks. You want lights where the fabric is up near the light, and when the fabric is down, covered by something, it's going to be gray. And then when it's way down, it's going to be dark. Almost black. So you can see in the reference photo underneath the dog, it's almost black. It's really, really dark. And for those areas, you want to mix black with another color. You don't want to just have black. So here we're starting on the eyes. So the eyes are easy. They're just balls of black with highlights. So that's pretty much what I'm doing here. So this is the Giro black pastel. And that is such a great, great pastel. I use that for everything. You can see immediately. You don't have to, if you get a pastel pencil and you come in and you're just like, I'm just going to get the pastel pencil and make a dark eye. It only works so much before it's just useless. So, and all you're doing is just grinding the pencil in because it's too hard. So this soft Giro pastel really makes it pop. So here I'm coming in with the Grumber, again Great American Pastels, and I will see you in the next video where we start the details with the pastel pencils.